A culture that no longer exists in modern day is cable television. It's a declining experience that's been dipping in subscribers consistently ever since it first peaked sometime around December of Y2K, and it's not showing a single sign of stopping, even expecting an overall market loss of $30 billion in 2027. Jesus. No one truly knows what the cause of this death in interest is, though perhaps it stems from predatory business practices or the overpriced bullshit that is the freedom to turn on the television, recognize nothing airing, and then be bombarded with advertisements for products that you'll never use.
It's the Wonder Boner. The Wonder Boner? Oh, you laugh now. Just watch. Voila! The Wonder Boner. My wife would like that.
This whole industry is living by a very, very thin string as the 26th season of Law & Order Special Victims Unit premieres about a week or so after this video is scheduled to come out. Your other option is to pay for a subscription service, only to realize that the one show that you actually wanted to watch is on someone else's subscription service, since every company that owns more than one IP is deciding that they need to gatekeep their own work for no reason, thus losing themselves money and annoying consumers who are gullible enough to actually buy into something like this. There are even some people who buy into so many subscription services that they're paying as much or even more than they would if they had just got cable instead. I could make a whole video solely on how television is bordering on becoming completely obsolete, but I'll avoid that for right now. As a kid, my parents had cable and I got a lot of use out of it. I was born right on the end of CRTs and VHS tapes, and I hated seeing them die out. I grew up appreciating these old ways of experiencing media, and I still do appreciate them to this day. It hurts me deeply to see cable go, but if I'm gonna be honest, I'm not gonna pay this much when I could just pirate something for free. Even then, I won't lie and say I wouldn't want to turn the TV on and leave some stupid shit in the living room playing. Listen, viewers, I need to come out and admit something. I'll understand if you see me in a different light after you hear this, but my guilty pleasure is shitty sitcoms. Cable television harbored some awful ones in its prime. Marvin, I Hate My Teenage Daughter. Do any of you even know about How Honey I'm Home? It centers around Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun, who lived next door to a Jewish couple, Arnie and Rosa Goldstein. Holy shit. There are a lot of sitcoms that have reasonably high ratings yet are unanimously counted as bad by the majority of the public, also known as everyone that I see online and in person. I've never met a single individual who defends The Office without there being an asterisk next to the word good, but I fear the day that I do. Hi, I'm Nosurname, and today I want to defend some of the shows that I somewhat secretly enjoy by telling you, the viewer who has never seen them outside of some awful out of context clips, some of their redeeming qualities that you wouldn't see unless you watched them yourself. And no one wants to watch all of Family Guy, right? Say, speaking of Family Guy first aired on Fox on January 31st of 1999, directly after the Super Bowl. It features the Griffins, a moderate to severely dysfunctional family. We have Peter, the titular family guy. He's a bit of a dope, but he means well and he loves his family dearly. Here's his wife Lois. She's pretty much a blank slate at first, but eventually does develop a bit more of a personality, though in the end she's mostly just a wife character throughout the show's run. Meg is the oldest child, being a teenage girl who struggles to fit in at school, but she does try her best to be like the popular girls. Chris is the second child. He's an incredibly artistic boy with autism, often struggling to be himself. Next is Stewie, the baby who's secretly evil and wants to kill his mother. This changes sometime around when season 2 hits, where he just becomes a thesaurus-using witty infant. Finally is my favorite, Brian, the family dog. He plays the straight man to Peter, who's also his best friend. He also often pairs up with Stewie after the personality change, and I love it a lot. When the show started airing the rest of season 1 in April of 1999, for some reason, it was received, well, kinda. It just wasn't really hitting it with audiences, and after 2 seasons, the show was canned in the year 2000. Then they brought it back for a 3rd and final season before it was canceled yet again in 2002. It wasn't entirely Family Guy's fault though. What it truly suffered from was time slot changes and competition. At the time, The Simpsons was finishing up its 10th season. At this point, it was slowly distancing itself from its prime, and it was pretty hard to not point at any other adult sitcoms and make comparisons to it. While that was going on, there were also a lot of other adult animated sitcoms that were hitting the waves. Namely, the big 2 were King of the Hill and Futurama, both of which joined The Simpsons and being better received. If you ask me, Family Guy stands out amongst the crowd. I mean, a talking dog? Where have you seen one of those before? Though it may not have lived long, Family Guy is one of the better shows from its time. It features some incredible character dynamics and scripting, with a lot of its humor stemming from the creator, Seth MacFarlane, growing up in the 70s and 80s. Because of that, there's a lot of references throughout that are nearly 50 years old, and in all honesty, I love it. It's a rare time where I can appreciate something I didn't understand, and it's all thanks to the charm and personality that Family Guy had. I've never heard of Callista Flockhart, but they referenced her in Season 2, Episode 6, Death is a Bitch, and for some reason, I find myself laughing. One of my favorite character building moments, and also one of my favorite episodes that the show has to offer, is Road to Rhode Island, where Stewie is visiting Lois's parents and Brian offers to go pick him up, as it also gives him a chance to meet his mother. I won't spoil anything after that, as I really recommend that you give it a try, but it's one of the best moments in all of the shows I've ever seen. There's also episodes that prove that while Peter is a drunkard, he still cares for his family. One good episode that shows off his love is A Picture is Worth $1,000, where Peter doesn't recognize Chris's artistic talent and instead sees the money that they can make from it. Chris is forbidden to see his father, who begins to miss him, so his new art exhibit is all art that he created of his father, who realizes just how important he is to Chris and how his influence really matters. I could keep going, but let it be known that this show ended far too soon. It's a shame that the show ended up becoming a cult classic and not a longer running show, but come on now, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a show that no one wants to watch anymore. After the cancellation, the Adult Swim block on Cartoon Network started airing reruns and people loved it. Not just that, but the show was also put on DVD and had a massive success. Sadly, this didn't lead to anything. Huh? In 2005, Family Guy came back for a 4th season, and hey, it was pretty good. Then it got picked up for a few more seasons, and they were alright too. A lot of the more well-known Family Guy memes come from around this era, seasons 4 through... Wow, what? That many? Watching Family Guy in order, you can really see everything changing and becoming stale. It's actually quite sad. By the time you reach season 9, where it finally becomes 16 by 9, it's all kind of just warped. The characters are no longer themselves and their personalities are skewed and mixed. Peter is much more of an asshole with less heart. Lois becomes more of a bitch. Meg becomes a punching bag and Chris becomes a creep. Stewie is oddly sexualized a lot. It's fine if he's gay, but I think I prefer when he's a hyper-intelligent baby going through baby day-to-day life. Oh, and Brian, don't even get me started. Brian wanted to do something with his life and tried to become a writer, but he sadly failed. He became less of a voice of reason and more of an annoying over-the-top liberal. He, as a character, changed the most and in the worst way. Sure, you could say that Joe changed more, from being a respectable man who took life by the handles, refusing to let his disability get to him, to a whining, suicidal, hey, that character is crippled and sad joke. But I have a theory about Brian. Hear me out, humor me for just a second. It is my firm belief that this show started going downhill the second Brian started seeing real-life women romantically. It's a slow spiral down that starts before the initial cancellation, so pay attention. The first time he ever pursues romance was in season 3, episode 13, where he seeked the love of a real dog. Not one that could talk like he could, but a more realistic dog. Weird, sure, but not as bad as what's to come. In season 3, episode 17, one of the best episodes that I also highly recommend, Brian helps an old lady see the world since she's been cooped up ever since her career as a singer died off. He falls in love with her, and spoiler warning, in her final moments, he shows her what their lives could have been together. A little weird, but whatever. This episode also has the Twin Towers, and in reruns, the Twin Towers are digitally removed. The plot thickens. Season 4 is where the snowballing began. Season 4, episode 7, Brian is on The Bachelorette and he stalks a woman from the show. Season 4, episode 11, Brian starts seeing Meg's history teacher. And then the final straw happens. Jillian in season 5, episode 2, Brian's first real and also longest relationship. By now, the snowball has multiplied in size. It was like every few episodes he would come with a new girl or have a problem with a girl that he was trying to see. He started becoming completely insufferable to the point that it ruined the entire show. Like I said, he became a caricature of a liberal instead of being what he was meant to be, Seth MacFarlane's persona. The best example is season 16, episode 6, where Brian makes a racist tweet.
About to see the new Kevin Hart movie. Just kidding, I'm white and went to college. Hashtag Baywatch movie.
In response to the obnoxious rioters outside of the Griffin house, he starts virtue signaling about how much black porn he watches and that he's kissed a trans woman. Before you ask, no, I will not elaborate on that, as I've already done so in a video from almost 2 years ago. Go watch that. I'm learning how to use the cards feature. It's up there. There's no character growth by the end of this. He just moves out and lets it all fade away from public consciousness, which takes a few episodes. By this point, everything had changed. Peter and Lois are in an unhappy marriage, Meg is some dark web murderous anomaly, Chris is a sexual predator, Stewie is practically a different character entirely, and it is my conspiracy theory belief that Brian is the root of everything. Everything started to change once he seeked real-life women romantically. This hurts me as a Brian Griffin stan. Do you know how hard it is to call him out when he's your idol? Starting around season 10 to the present, Family Guy has become a better background noise and not a show about a loving family with their own problems and desires. The references aren't funny anymore either. Now it's just lazy and uncomfortable current day nonsense that's going to feel super outdated within the month. It worked back with the first few seasons because the references were already a bit old, so it was more like a callback. This isn't me saying it's all bad now. There's still a few good jokes here and there, but they're so few and far between. In defense of Family Guy, it got 4 really good seasons full of jokes and great characters, even if there's a lot of pretty roughly aged moments in there. Take my advice. Watch seasons 1 through 4, and then if you really want to, you should take the time to watch seasons 5 through 9 and stop there unless you need something to play in the background while you're busy. As many of you may be aware, I often buy things that are a bit impractical, expensive, or unnecessary for my projects, and this video joins the crowd of being a bit on the Mel bought something stupid for a bit in a video side of things. Get ready to see a lot of this life-size cardboard cutout of Sheldon Cooper in as many videos as I can fit it in to ensure that those $50 can be counted as a tax write-off, assuming I ever learn how to do that. He even said bazinga, like in the show! The Big Bang Theory is our second victim of attempted defending, despite the many pleas of my viewers to not do so. It first premiered in September of 2007, and there's a couple of good jokes in here, namely ones that really date the show by referencing MySpace.
We need to widen our circle.
I have a very wide circle. I have 212 friends on MySpace.
There's some transphobia in here too.
New neighbor?
Evidently.
Significant improvement over the old neighbor.
200-pound transvestite with a skin condition? Yes, she is.
I think we should be good neighbors. Invite her over, make her feel welcome.
We never invited Louis/Louise over.
And that was wrong of us.
Hey, fun fact, they call back to this in a future episode and it's just as bad as you'd expect it to be.
Yeah.
Dr. Cooper?
No, you want the crazy guy across the hall.
Thanks, Chuck Lorre. This all comes from the same man who made an attack helicopter-esque joke about wanting a surgery to become a hawk back in 2013. This show was absolutely massive throughout most of its run, currently standing as the 75th most profitable franchise of all time. It showcases the lives of a group of science nerds who also happen to be media geeks. This is where I'll say my piece on the difference between nerds and geeks. Geeks are the ones who are more into comics and video games, while nerds are the ones who are more book smart. I still use them interchangeably, but that's just my stance. Let's talk about the cast, starting with the 4 main men. Sheldon Cooper is an autistic theoretical physicist who is so unbelievably unaware of social cues and norms that he tends to annoy people or just make them uncomfortable. Next is his roommate Leonard, the most socially adjusted of the 4. I know that's not saying much. Raj is feminine and is almost always the butt of either a racist joke about Indians or a homophobic joke about how he's a metrosexual. Next is Howard, a literal sex pest and nuisance. Before he found a long-term relationship, he was constantly annoying women for sex and was luckily always denied. Next are the girls, first up being Penny. She's a failed actress who is as stereotypically blonde as you can get, dumb, forgetful, sleeps around, etc. She ends up becoming a better, more open person due to moving in across the hall from a couple of socially inept PhD holders, so that's nice. Bernadette is a terrifying woman who fell in love with the aforementioned sex pest. Her whole personality is being a scary woman with a high-pitched voice. She also voices Howard's mom. I think that's really funny. Lastly is Amy, essentially a female Sheldon until she hangs out with the other girls a bit more, finally giving her a real unique personality. The Big Bang Theory does a few things quite well. Most importantly to me is showcasing having friends. I live in a reasonably sized town, but there's not a whole lot of people around here who I actively hang out with. The way these people all get together and eat dinner with each other, talk about their days, and play video games really resonated with me. I want that. I don't have 6 other people in my town who all know each other and myself who can all make free time to come over for dinner and have a Halo night. I've never even played Halo, but I want what they have. Damn you, Sheldon, for I am envious of your social circle. Something else I think it does really well that is a bit underappreciated and unnoticed is how it represents the nerds and geeks within itself. Nerds back then had this stereotype stereotype of being hateful, rude, and gatekeeping man-children who would hop on any woman they could since they wouldn't see them regularly. While that aged relatively poorly, with that now being more of an incel thing and less of a nerdy, geeky thing, I think it's actually quite funny to look back on. Our main four are a fair bit reminiscent of that old caricature. They're homophobic, they're racist, they're transphobic, the whole 9 yards. They treat the single gay character in the entire show poorly. Homosexuality is treated more like a joke than a real thing that someone could be, and the only references to trans people are absolutely as bad as it could be. Outside of the main cast, the show presents the average nerd from Days Gone as those previously stated stereotypes: fat slobs and uncomfortable freaks.
Yeah, that's Captain Sweatpants.
The latter does leak into Sheldon, Leonard, Raj, and Howard a bit, but they're presented as being in the right in many cases. A good example is Season 2, Episode 12, where Howard is being uncomfortably sexual towards Penny, the only woman in the group at that point, for the umpteenth time. She finally tells him off after many episodes of literal sexual harassment, and we, as a viewer, are intended to feel bad for him. No. Like, the fake crowd sounds sad for him, implying that we are supposed to be sad as well.
Howard, where are you going?
I'm going home to live my creepy, pathetic life.
Wow.
Well, someone had to say it.
On a more positive note, it showcases what nerd culture was back before it was more mainstream and trendy to be into geeky things. Seeing all these real cool set pieces and props, all sorts of neat toys and cool references, Donkey Kong, Jenga. There's so many neat trinkets on this show that real dorks like myself would absolutely fucking die for. They have a comic book store that they go to, like how I often go to my local game store. My local comic book shop shut down and I still haven't mentally recovered. In Season 7, Episode 19, Sheldon struggles choosing between the PS4 and Xbox One. It's really nice to see something I could relate to. I might be a Nintendo whore, but I can still appreciate this. Look, there's a Nintendo 3DS ad in the background. I'm vindicated. Now, with that being said, something that the show doesn't do right is its references as a whole. Sure, they bring up some interesting things and actually make references correctly and comically, but there are plenty of times where it feels like they're just spitting random names of characters on popular franchises that you'd see as Funko Pops with the intent of jingling keys in front of their uncultured main demographic.
So it's settled. The fate of Doctor Who's TARDIS will be decided by a Game of Thrones-inspired deathmatch on the battlefield of Thundercats versus Transformers.
Boobies.
The people who actually like Thundercats and Transformers aren't watching The Big Bang Theory, but middle-aged cisheads who can name one Pokemon, guess who it is, are. Except me. I watch The Big Bang Theory. Does that make me a middle-aged cishet? A final note on things that this show does poorly is its portrayal of autism and neurodivergence as a whole. Sheldon's complete lack of awareness and thought for other people's feelings, his obsession with organization and order. There's something here to say about how he's the average neurotypical's imaginary person with autism and not a proper representation. It's a bit hard to have proper representation, as every autistic person is a little bit different. It's kind of like what The Good Doctor is, where it shows a pretty harmful stereotype to its main demographic of people who aren't what's being shown, thus giving them what's going to end up being a bit of a weird depiction of these types of people in their heads.
You have cancer.
The show ended with its 12th season, running from 2007 to 2012. To put that into perspective, they referenced MySpace in episode 1, and in season 12, episode 9, the final season, Raj and Howard are playing Fortnite.
Now I'm doing a victory dance to celebrate.
I don't know if you'd like it. It's kind of for gamers.
Hey, I'm a gamer. I play Candy Crush, Bejeweled, and Sesame Street Letter School, which I beat our daughter at every single time.
How else could they approach such a topic without making it misogynistic? I think they even referenced TikTok in this show, but I may be very wrong. I don't remember. It's been a few months. I think despite its awful treatment of anyone who isn't a cisgendered, heterosexual white male, the show's earlier seasons can serve as a perfect time capsule of what being a fan of comic books and video games once was before the public opinion began shifting on geeky culture, making it more of a status symbol than something to hide away in shame. It reminds me of a lot of Loot Crate, that and pop figures. When both of those became really popular circa the early to mid 2010s, so did being open about how much you absolutely fucking loved Batman. Though while it serves as a time capsule, I believe it also harmed geek and nerd culture, what with its portrayal of them being seen by more eyes than the average depiction in cartoons from before its time. The end of the show is courtesy of many actors, most prominently Jim Parsons, the actor of Sheldon, wanting to move on with their lives. Jim said that if they went ahead with a season 13, that he would not be a part of it, and thus the show was ended. The franchise sold so much merchandise, being worth more than $4.5 billion. Now, surely it couldn't become that huge with only one television show, right? Right? In March of 2017, while The Big Bang Theory was working on its 10th season, CBS had the spin-off series Young Sheldon ordered, and it premiered in September of that same year. If you could believe it, the show revolves around Sheldon, but as a kid. It's a pretty good concept considering what The Big Bang Theory was. Where else would you go to create your spin-off for your wildly successful sitcom about a child prodigy turned theoretical physicist? To when he was a child prodigy, obviously. Let's cover our characters, with the first being, of course, Sheldon. If you could believe it, he's a young version of Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, only now it's kind of cute and wholesome seeing his growth and learning experiences, none of which he really ever retains, as by the time Bink Bonk Booby starts, he's still a total inconsiderate fuck. But at least in young Sheldon, they do a good job of showing him learning and growing, even if it doesn't stick throughout its entire run. He's still annoying, but it's passable, and even then, when the episodes don't focus on him, it tends to be a lot better. As is mentioned in Ding Dong Theory, Sheldon has an older brother and a twin sister, both of whom feel like he gets all of the attention, and given how it's presented in the show, he really does. Let's start with a twin sister, Missy. Obligatory showcase of my cat, who is coincidentally also named Missy. Say hi to her, everyone. Sheldon's twin sister is a very girly girl, but she has that Texan blood in her, so there's a bit of tomboyishness that sets up for some good plots about her accepting how she is, which is not some drawn-up, obnoxious, yep, that's a girl type character. The other sibling is Georgie, or George Jr. He's rebellious, and like Missy, he's also a bit on the less smart side of things. What he lacks in book smarts, he makes up for being an incredibly amusing character, being a bit of a businessman who likes to annoy his father to prove points. The other family members are Mary, Connie, and George, mom, grandma, and dad respectively. Mary is a devout Christian, and she struggles with Sheldon being the only one in the family who does not believe in a god. In fact, she struggles with being a Christian, having moments of weakness and showing her flaws presented in a really human way. Her mom, Connie, lives across the street and is more of a free-thinking lady, the living embodiment of the cool aunt, but she's the grandma. I like both of these characters a lot, but not as much as I like the best character in the entire show, the dad, George Cooper Sr. Let's talk about him for a second. This man is shown to be loving and caring. Sure, he drinks a bit and he has his problems with his anger from time to time, but he's an incredibly well-meaning father who does his best to keep his family afloat and happy. The entire reason this video exists is because of him. I was watching Family Guy for no particular reason aside from wanting background noise. Then I decided to watch Young Sheldon after I caught up on Family Guy and saw this clip from season 2 episode 20 floating around on Twitter, and it reminded me of how much I actually kind of liked the show.
This is my mom's boyfriend, Clint.
Hello, Clint. What can we do for you?
I'm here to pick up Veronica.
You want to go with this man?
No, sir.
You heard her.
You really want to mess with me?
Sure. Why not? You might want to call the police.
Why?
There's a bum sleeping on our front porch.
I watched Young Sheldon as each episode premiered while I was in high school up until season 2 episode 15, but then it was zapped back into my mind like a traumatic experience. Then I realized that there's a video to be had when watching these sitcoms. They're not exactly good, and at least one or two I would say are even far from being good, but this scene gave me the idea to talk about what people might not see if they haven't seen the show. George is a superb guy. He bonds with his kids, he helps them express themselves, he is without a doubt a dad I would have needed growing up. I don't know how to say this, but he strikes me as a man who would be completely okay if I came out to him. In season 7, episode 3, he learns that Missy's new friend Taylor isn't a girl, but rather a boy. She lies and says that Taylor is gay so her father won't freak out. Instead of going nuts over the fact that she's friends with a gay person, he's instead proud of himself and his daughter for being so progressive.
He doesn't like me like that.
He's a 13-year-old boy. He likes all girls like that. Oh.
Yeah.
It's a different world, Mayor. I'm proud of Missy for keeping an open mind, and shoot, I'm proud of myself.
In Texas? In the 90s? Now, while he's obviously a good dad, any Fling Krong beer reviewer might say otherwise. Want to know why? Well, one reason is that his actor is also the same man who played Leonard's school bully in season 5, episode 11 of Three Prong Jury. The other reason might be because throughout Dink Donk Doobie, George Cooper is talked about as if he were an abusive, neglectful drunkard who loved football and beer more than his own family that he's always fighting with. This is not reflected in the spinoff, and in fact, it completely contradicts it. In the book, The Big Bang Theory, The Definitive Inside Story by Jessica Radloff. Yes, I read books sometimes, and of course, the one time I get to talk about it is when it's a book covering fucking Big Bang Theory. George's actor, Lance Barber, talks about this exact problem and makes a good point. We all misremember things from our childhood, and despite Sheldon's picture-perfect memory, his feelings about his father are different from young Sheldon to Trignog. We see George and young Sheldon from an outside perspective, but in The Big Bang, we remember him in Sheldon's words, which are subjective to his personal thoughts and feelings. Quote, "One way to deal with the loss of a loved one is to paint a negative picture of them so it doesn't hurt so much." There's a lot of times that these two shows contradict each other, outside of this horrid mischaracterization, and there's examples all over the place. For one, in season 2, episode 10 of Young Sheldon, Sheldon, who is 9 at this point, claims that he only knows 2 languages, both English and Klingon. But in season 10, episode 22 of The Big Bang Theory, he says that he knew Hindi at age 8. These episodes are only 1 year and 8 months apart. I feel like if there's any contradictions that could have been avoided, this was one of them. I got sidetracked. Let me get back on topic here. Sheldon talks a lot about his childhood in The Big Bang Theory, telling stories of his time growing up in Texas as a preteen in high school. In Young Sheldon, we see callbacks to some of those stories. One of these especially important ones also takes place in season 2, episode 10, where Sheldon becomes worried that he's going to grow up to be lonely and weird. He then picks up the art of practical jokes, which is where he also picks up his signature catchphrase.
If it's funny, it's bazinga.
This word is plastered everywhere. Bazinga, cringe, meme, dog, Gen Z, trendy, nature, slang, long sleeve t-shirt. Do they not know it's illegal to use this word on things like this? Warner Bros has a trademark on this fucking thing. I really want one of these shirts, so I'm expecting one of you viewers to pick one out and send it to my P.O. box. I won't tell you my size. This is a guessing game. T-shirt gambling, if you will. Overall, Young Sheldon, I think, is what sitcoms should be. It's not perfect, don't get me wrong, but of all the shows I've watched for this video, it is the best of the crowd. It features lovable characters who grow and change as people. They have faults, and it's shown that they work on themselves instead of being insufferable cocks the whole time. There's not a single character that I particularly dislike in this show at all. Everyone has their own special episodes that help flesh them out so you can understand their motives and desires. It's also the only show that lacks any bigoted jokes, possibly because it's the newest one, but I digress. Okay, maybe I do think this show is good. Maybe I'm lying, okay? Are you happy? You caught me. I love this show. Young Sheldon is actually pretty damn good. I'm sorry. Spoiler warning, skip to this time code if you don't want massive spoilers, but when George Cooper died, I cried. Watching how they depicted Sheldon coping with the death of his father, how he regretted his decisions leading up to it, and how everyone was acting before and during the funeral, it all reminded me of when my mom and dad died. I watched the finale in a Discord call with like 10 other people earlier this year, and multiple of us were in tears. Listen, do not believe what the Twitter losers are gonna tell you. Young Sheldon is worth a watch if you can handle Sheldon being a bit obnoxious. You know that image of the guy who stopped digging right before finding diamonds? That is this show. If you can put up with some episodes that might not be your speed, you're in for a perfect sitcom that doesn't feel the need to laugh in your face so you know when the joke is supposed to be funny. Our world is filled with many unanswered questions that have stood the test of time and have proven to be constant for the rest of our existence. They will forever remain pending, open to debates that have no conclusion, never seeing the shining green light from being fact-checked by real American patriots. Who created the universe? Is there more life outside of Earth? Are we truly alone? Were Ross and Rachel actually on a break? I have nowhere else to mention this, but I had to watch the final 1/3 of season 6, episode 1 by a YouTube reaction video since the place I was watching it didn't have the full episode. I noticed that the way that they avoided copyright was by putting a little watermark over the visuals and cutting to their face cam.
Hey Chandler, enjoy your handful.
I'm gonna try to emulate that just a tiny bit in this section. Friends is the oldest sitcom in this video, first beginning in September of 1994, featuring the titular friends. 6 of them to be precise. They each have their own unique personalities and quirks to help them stand out from each other, giving the viewers a stronger chance to relate to someone. So let's go one at a time. We will first cover the 2 that are seen the most on screen. Brother and sister, Ross and Monica. Ross is an awkward dinosaur kid, but in a full-grown man's body. He was married to and even had a child with a woman who ended up being a lesbian. Monica grew up as a fat kid and therefore has a lot of insecurities. She tends to be a bit of a control freak, and it can be stressful just watching her get upset. Next, we have Chandler. Rest in peace, Matthew Perry. He's the funny man, grew up in a broken household and uses comedy to cope. Then we have Rachel, the stuck-up snob girl. She often throws the feelings of other people out of the way if it means that she can climb the ladder.
Ooh, that's a funny joke.
She comes from a rich household, so she lived on being the 1% until the beginning of the show. With as much respect as I can give, I hate her character. Of all of them, she is the worst. Oh, and she also dated Ross for a while. More on that later. Now we get to the two that I like the most. Next is Joey, our second attempted actor in this video. He's a himbo and he sleeps around a lot, similar to how Penny was in the earlier seasons of The Big Bang. Similar to Howard in The Big Bang, he's a bit of a sex pest, but the way that he approaches it is less incel-y and more of what I'd expect from a man who just wants to fuck. For lack of better words, it's kind of like that image of the girl calling HR on the less conventionally attractive guy.
Stealing content is very easy.
Then our final character is Phoebe Buffay, the vegan masseuse musician who says weird things and does weird things. Her whole character is that she's a bit odd and bizarre and not of the ordinary.
Make sure to like and subscribe for that awesome video I reacted to. Fuck!
Friends is possibly the most impactful on modern culture out of everything I've mentioned. Of what's here, it has the most merchandise and the most consistent fan base, and there's a fuck ton of stuff still being made of the show over 20 years after it ended. There are so many boxes on Culture Fly full of references only someone who watched the entire show would get. These plates just have screenshots from the show on them? I tried to get Culture Fly to sponsor this video solely so I could have some free stuff for a bit, but they never responded to my emails or Twitter DMs, so you'll have to settle for this.
Oh, God. What did I do last night? Oh, fuck. God damn it.
Is this funny? By the way, you can get a Friends subscription box. Like every few months, you'll get new Friends merch with references from the show that ended 20 years ago. How many times can they reference You're My Lobster before it becomes a little bit too much? There's a lot of really weird ups and downs in this show. I really like that it has a sense of togetherness, similar to how I liked it in Big Bang Theory, The. These people are friends and they stick together. They help each other. Sure, they tend to create some wild-ass scenarios for one another, but there's something so nice in seeing how all 6 of them have bonded and are close. However, there's a negative that comes up with this. Despite being best friends, when a concern comes up that causes one friend to have a problem with another, instead of just talking to each other, they just assume the worst and panic. This is pretty normal in all sorts of sitcoms. Hell, it's even a real-life concept, but Friends kicks it up a notch. One of my favorite examples is in season 9, episode 4, titled The One with the Sharks. Spoiler warning, by the way. Monica visits Chandler, who's in Oklahoma working in Tulsa. She walks in on him jerking his peanuts, and he quickly changes the channel to some shark attack footage. She then assumes that he gets off to sharks and buys him a shark VHS tape to show that she supports his theoretical shark fetish. This happens so often throughout the show, and yes, I know it's how plot happens, but come on. They're supposed to be close and love each other. How can they consider themselves best friends, or, I don't know, husband and wife in this case, if they aren't willing to just have a quick talk? I'd be confident in saying that at least 25% of the show's run are plots that could have been solved by a conversation that would have lasted less than a minute. Don't get me wrong though, there are still some pretty funny moments. It's written reasonably well. They make a lot of callbacks and help build stories around each of the main 6. It's really nice. One of my favorite arcs is Phoebe's, where she's on the hunt for her birth father. Her whole life is rather tragic, and we learn a lot about her past throughout the show's run. And with this context given to her life, it makes me appreciate her a lot more. Her father hunt saga takes place over the course of many episodes and doesn't exactly have a cemented end, but it is a really nice story, seeing her meet her family, learn more pieces about her parents. She even reunites with Frank Jr., one of her siblings, and then gives birth to his triplets. No, I will not elaborate. Let's quickly get the gay discussion out of the way. Ross's ex-wife left him because she was gay. There's some really good jokes about it. There's also a lot of pretty funny gay jokes all throughout the show, but there's also a lot of toxic masculinity alongside it. For every 2 gay jokes, there's at least one, "Oh wow, aren't you a woman?" joke. I'm not gonna say it's the worst thing in the world. It's from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s, and credit where it's due. They handled a lot of the gay jokes reasonably well, but it's always kind of lost me when it's like, haha, these male characters are being feminine. That means they're gay. They also have at least one joke about trans people, and it is not good. The one I remember the most was in season 2, episode 3, where Joey talks about a girl he dated before and how she had a big Adam's apple.
When I first moved to the city, I went out a couple times with this girl, really hot, great kisser, but she had the biggest Adam's apple. Nuts.
You or me? I got it. Joey, women don't have Adam's apples.
You guys are messing with me, right?
Yeah.
That was a good one. For a second there, I was like, whoa.
Not a really huge fan of how the first time they reference trans people is a really rude joke. Fun fact for everyone out there, every human has an Adam's apple. To memory, this is the only time they make a reference to trans people, but I could be very wrong. Though they do have Chandler's dad, aka the drag queen. Though, if you ask me, it's pretty obvious that he is intended to be a she. One of the co-creators of the show, Marta Kaufman, talked about how she regretted the way that this character was approached, and I think that that's some pretty good development as a person to acknowledge these mistakes. I honestly kind of like the episode where Helena Handbasket, that's her name, is shown off. It's not perfect, but there's some really good queer jokes, and I quite like how Chandler seems to grow as a person out of this. Friends also tends to normalize sexual assault, like, a lot. There's too many examples I could talk about, but there's so many times where the girls are just doing something genuinely awful because girl is girl, and it's perfectly fine and no one bats an eye. It's part of what made my watching experience so odd. I don't like that. I guess this is a straight people thing from the 90s to normalize sexual assault, right? Anyhow, it's time for the big topic at hand. When speaking on Ross and Rachel, I mentioned that they dated. Well, this is where the big question comes in. See, while they were dating, Ross let some of his insecurities get the best of him, and he got upset thinking that Rachel was seeing someone from work, and Rachel suggested that they take a break. Ross walks out without ever agreeing to it, and then sleeps with a girl. Were they actually on a break? Neither of them actually agreed to it, but given Ross's character, I don't think he'd do that without thinking they were. So here's the breakdown. They were on a break, as Rachel was the first one to suggest that they take one, and the first one to suggest that they were on one later. However, the immediate jump into someone else's arms is pretty unacceptable, so shame on you, Ross. And also Rachel. She did it too, but they stopped before sex. They're awful for each other. Okay, off script, I'm sorry. I had a math teacher for my junior and senior year of school. It was for statistics and finance, and he had this questionnaire he would give before Christmas break, and the final question was, were Ross and Rachel on a break? And I was a little bit familiar with the show as a kid, so I always answer the same way, and he never agreed with me. He thinks Ross was in the right. Fuck you, Mr. What was his name? I think it was Cummingham? Cummins? I had cum in it, and people made fun of him for that. That's all I know. In conclusion, the only show that you should actually be watching out of these is Young Sheldon. Give it a try and tell me if you don't love the Brisket King himself. Every sitcom has goods and bads, though given how the genre approaches itself, I feel it may be a bit heavier in the bad side. I tried to find the redeeming qualities in 4 beloved yet heavily panned shows, and I imagine you could too. I watched over 1,000 episodes of television in the past 11 months, and I got a pretty neat video out of my thoughts and feelings. You should also take the time to watch shows that you remember from when you were growing up. See how you feel about them now. Make your own video essay. Also, buy a Sheldon Cooper cardboard cutout like I did. Join the club, it's pretty lonely here.
I think I'm gonna keep the hat now.
Oh, fuck!